Hey guys, Sam from Manfa's Makes. Happy Sunday. Enjoy the last day of your weekend. I hope your weekend has been absolutely fantabulous. So, hi to all my returners and hi to any newbies. If you are new here, on a Saturday and a Sunday, I read you stories from this book here, which is Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. There is a whole playlist. Please do go back and check out the other stories if you haven't already done so. And I have also read The Wizard of Oz, which has its own playlist also. These stories were written a very, very long time ago. I am literally just reading the words from the pages as the author originally wrote them. Any themes, any hidden messages, anything like that, any points of view, I am not saying that I share them. I am literally just reading you stories because a lot of you like to craft listening to an audiobook, and although I'm not an official audiobook, I do like to share some stories so that you can craft without having to keep looking at the screen, because you can just listen. All I do is read, guys. I don't even give you eye contact half the time, so just listen away. That is absolutely fine. Okay, so let's get started, shall we? Let's open up and see where we are. We are on story 89 and it is called The Goose Girl. So, here we go. There was once upon a time an old queen whose husband had been dead for many years, and she had a beautiful daughter. When the princess grew up, she was betrothed to a prince who lived at a great distance. When the time came for her to be married, and she had to journey forth into the distant kingdom, the aged queen packed up for her many costly vessels of silver and gold, and trinkets also of gold and silver, and cups and jewels, in short, everything which appertained to a royal dowry, for she loved her child with all her heart. She likewise sent her maid-in-waiting, who was to ride with her, and hand her over to the bridegroom, and each had a horse for the journey. But the horse of the king's daughter was called Falada, and could speak. So when the hour of parting had come, the aged mother went into her bedroom, took a small knife and cut her finger with it until it bled. Then she held a white handkerchief to it, into which she let 3 drops of blood fall, gave it to her daughter, and said, "Dear child, preserve this carefully. It will be of service to you on your way." So they took a sorrowful leave of each other. The princess put the piece of cloth in her bosom, mounted her horse, and then went away to her bridegroom. After she had ridden for a while, she felt a burning thirst, and said to her waiting maid, "Dismount and take my cup which you have brought with you for me, and get me some water from the stream, for I should like to drink." "If you are thirsty," said the waiting maid, "get off your horse yourself and lie down and drink out of the water. I don't choose to be your servant." So in her great thirst the princess alighted, bent down over the water in the stream and drank, and was not allowed to drink out of the golden cup. Then she said, "Ah, heaven!" and the 3 drops of blood answered, "If your mother knew, her heart would break." But the king's daughter was humble, said nothing, and mounted her horse again. She rode some miles further, but the day was warm, the sun scorched her, and she was thirsty once more. And when they came to a stream of water, she again cried to her waiting maid, "Dismount and give me some water in my golden cup," for she had long ago forgotten the girl's ill words. But the waiting maid said still more haughtily, "If you wish to drink, drink as you can. I don't choose to be your maid." Then in her great thirst the king's daughter alighted, bent over the flowing stream, wept, and said, "Ah, heaven!" And the drops of blood again replied, "If your mother knew this, her heart would break." And as she was thus drinking, and leaning right over the stream, the handkerchief with the 3 drops of blood fell out of her bosom and floated away with the water without her observing it, so great was her trouble. The waiting maid, however, had seen it, and she rejoiced to think that she now had power over the bride, for since the princess had lost the drops of blood she had become weak and powerless. So now when she wanted to mount her horse again, the one that was called Falada, the waiting maid said, "Falada is more suitable for me, and my nag will do for you," and the princess had to be content with that. Then the waiting maid, with many hard words, bade the princess exchange her royal apparel for her own shabby clothes, and at length she was compelled to swear by the clear sky above her that she would not say one word of this to anyone at the royal court, and if she had not taken this oath she would have been killed on the spot. But Falada saw all this and observed it well. The waiting maid now mounted Falada, and the true bride the bad horse, and thus they travelled onwards, until at length they entered the royal palace. There were great rejoicings over her arrival, and the prince sprang forward to meet her, lifted the waiting maid from her horse, and thought she was his consort. She was conducted upstairs, but the real princess was left standing below. Then the old king looked out of the window and saw her standing in the courtyard, and how dainty and delicate and beautiful she was, and instantly went to the royal apartment and asked the bride about the girl she had with her, who was standing down below in the courtyard, and who she was. I picked her up on my way for a companion. Give the girl something to work at, that she may not stand idle. But the old king had no work for her, and knew of none, so he said, I have a little boy who tends the geese, she may help him. The boy was called Conrad, and the true bride had to help him to tend the geese. Soon afterwards the false bride said to the young king, Dearest husband, I beg you to do me a favour. He answered, I will do so most willingly. Then send for the knacker and have the head of the horse on which I rode here cut off, for it vexed me on the way. In reality, she was afraid that the horse might tell how she had behaved to the king's daughter. Then she succeeded in making the king promise that it should be done, and the faithful Falada was to die. This came to the ears of the real princess, and she secretly promised to pay the knacker a piece of gold if he would perform a small service for her. There was a great dark-looking gateway in the town, through which morning and evening she had to pass with the geese. Would he be so good as to nail up Falada's head on it, so that she might see him again more than once? The knacker promised to do that, and cut off the head and nailed it fast beneath the dark gateway. Early in the morning, when she and Conrad drove out their flock beneath this gateway, she said in passing, Alas, Falada, hanging there. Then the head answered, Alas, young queen, how ill you fare. If this your tender mother knew, her heart would surely break in two. Then they went still further out of the town and drove their geese into the country. And when they had come to the meadow, she sat down and unbound her hair, which was like pure gold. And Conrad saw it and delighted in its brightness, and wanted to pluck out a few hairs. Then she said, Blow, blow, you gentle wind, I say, blow Conrad's little hat away, and make him chase it here and there, until I have braided all my hair, and bound it up again. And there came such a violent wind that it blew Conrad's hat far away across country, and he was forced to run after it. When he came back, she had finished combing her hair and was putting it up again, and he could not get any of it. Then Conrad was angry and would not speak to her, and thus they watched the geese until the evening, and then they went home. Next day, when they were driving the geese out through the dark gateway, the maiden said, Alas, Falada, hanging there. Falada answered, Alas, young queen, how ill you fare. If this your tender mother knew, her heart would surely break in two. And she sat down again in the field and began to comb out her hair, and Conrad ran and tried to clutch it. So she said in haste, Blow, blow, you gentle wind, I say, blow Conrad's little hat away, and make him chase it here and there, until I have braided all my hair and bound it up again. Then the wind blew, and blew his little hat off his head and far away, and Conrad was forced to run after it. And when he came back, her hair had been put up a long time, and he could get none of it, and so they looked after their geese till evening came. But in the evening, after they had got home, Conrad went to the old king and said, I won't tend the geese with that girl any longer. Why not? Inquired the aged king. Oh, because she vexes me the whole day long. Then the aged king commanded him to relate what it was that she did to him, and Conrad said, In the morning, when we pass beneath the dark gateway with the flock, there is a sorry horse's head on the wall, and she says to it, Alas, Falada, hanging there. And the head replies, Alas, young queen, how ill you fare. If this your tender mother knew, her heart would surely break in two. And Conrad went on to relate what happened on the goose pasture, and how, when there, he had to chase his hat. The aged king commanded him to drive his flock out again next day, and as soon as morning came, he placed himself behind the dark gateway, and heard how the maiden spoke to the head of Falada, and then he too went into the country, and hid himself in the thicket in the meadow. There he soon saw with his own eyes the goose girl and the goose boy bringing their flock, and how after a while she sat down and unplaited her hair, which shone with radiance, and soon she said, Blow, blow, you gentle wind, I say, blow Conrad's little hat away, and make him chase it here and there, until I have braided all my hair and bound it up again. Then came a blast of wind and carried off Conrad's hat so that he had to run far away, while the maiden quietly went on combing and plaiting her hair, all of which the king observed. Then, quite unseen, he went away, and when the goose girl came home in the evening, he called her aside and asked why she did all these things. I may not tell you that, and I dare not lament my sorrows to any human being, for I have sworn not to do so by the heaven which is above me. If I had not done that, I should have lost my life. He urged her and left her no peace, but he could draw nothing from her. Then said he, If you will not tell me anything, tell your sorrows to the iron stove there, and he went away. Then she crept into the iron stove and began to weep and lament and emptied her whole heart and said, Here I am deserted by the whole world, and yet I am a king's daughter, and a false waiting maid has by force brought me to such a pass that I have been compelled to put off my royal apparel, and she has taken my place with my bridegroom, and I have to perform menial service as a goose girl. If my mother did but know that, her heart would break. The aged king, however, was standing outside by the pipe of the stove and was listening to what she said and heard it. Then he came back again and bade her come out of the stove, and royal garments were placed on her, and it was marvellous how beautiful she was. The aged king summoned his son and revealed to him that he had got the false bride, who was only a waiting maid, but that the true one was standing there, who had been the goose girl. The young king rejoiced with all his heart when he saw her beauty and youth, and a great feast was made ready, to which all the people and all good friends were invited. At the head of the table sat the bridegroom with the king's daughter at one side of him, and the waiting maid on the other. But the waiting maid was blinded, and did not recognize the princess in her dazzling array. When they had eaten and drunk and were merry, the aged king asked the waiting maid as a riddle what a person deserved who had behaved in such a way to her master, and at the same time related the whole story and asked what sentence such a one merited. Then the false bride said she deserves no better fate than to be stripped entirely naked and put in a barrel which is studded inside with pointed nails, and 2 white horses should be harnessed to it, which will drag her along through one street after another till she is dead. It is you, said the aged king, and you have pronounced your own sentence, and thus shall it be done unto you. And when the sentence had been carried out, the young king married his true bride, and both of them reigned over their kingdom in peace and happiness. Okie dokie, so we are on story 90. And we'll see whether we will get another one in or not. But let's carry on with the young giant. Once upon a time, a countryman had a son who was as big as a thumb and did not become any bigger, and during several years did not grow 1 hair's breadth. Once, when the father was going out to plough, the little one said, Father, I will go out with you. You would go out with me, said the father. Stay here, you will be of no use out there. Besides, you might get lost. Then Thumbling began to cry, and for the sake of peace his father put him in his pocket and took him with him. When he was outside in the field, he took him out again and set him in a freshly cut furrow. While he was there, a great giant came over the hill. Do you see that great bogey, said the father, for he wanted to frighten the little fellow to make him good. He is coming to fetch you. The giant, however, had scarcely taken 2 steps with his long legs before he was in the furrow. He took up little Thumbling carefully with 2 fingers, examined him, and without saying 1 word went away with him. His father stood by, but could not utter a sound for terror, and he thought nothing else but that his child was lost, and that as long as he lived he should never set eyes on him again. The giant, however, carried him home, suckled him, and Thumbling grew and became tall and strong after the manner of giants. When 2 years had passed, the old giant took him into the forest, wanted to try him, and said, Pull up a stick for yourself. Then the boy was already so strong that he tore up a young tree out of the earth by the roots. But the giant thought, We must do better than that, took him back again, and suckled him 2 years longer. When he tried him, his strength had increased so much that he could tear an old tree out of the ground. That was still not enough for the giant. He again suckled him for 2 years, and when he then went with him into the forest and said, Now just tear up a proper stick for me, the boy tore up the strongest oak tree from the earth so that it split, and that was a mere trifle to him. Now that will do, said the giant, you are perfect, and took him back to the field from where he had brought him. His father was there following the plough. The young giant went up to him and said, "Does my father see what a fine man his son has grown into?" The farmer was alarmed and said, "No, you are not my son. I don't want you. Leave me." "Truly I am your son. Allow me to do your work. I can plough as well as you, nay, better." "No, no, you are not my son, and you cannot plough. Go away." However, as he was afraid of this great man, he let go of the plough, stepped back, and stood at one side of the piece of land. Then the youth took the plough and just pressed it with one hand, but his grasp was so strong that the plough went deep into the earth. The farmer could not bear to see that, and called to him, "If you are determined to plough, you must not press so hard on it. That makes bad work." The youth, however, unharnessed the horses and drew the plough himself, saying, "Just go home, father, and bid my mother make ready a large dish of food, and in the meantime I will go over the field." Then the farmer went home and ordered his wife to prepare the food, but the youth ploughed the field, which was 2 acres large, quite alone, and then he harnessed himself to the harrow and harrowed the whole of the land, using 2 harrows at once. When he had done it, he went into the forest and pulled up 2 oak trees, laid them across his shoulders, and hung on them 1 harrow behind and one before, and also 1 horse behind and one before, and carried all as if it had been a bundle of straw to his parents' house. When he entered the yard, his mother did not recognize him and asked, "Who is that horrible tall man?" The farmer said, "That is our son." She said, "No, that cannot be our son. We never had such a tall one. Ours was a little thing." She called to him, "Go away, we do not want you." The youth was silent, but led his horses to the stable, gave them some oats and hay and all that they wanted. When he had done this, he went into the parlour, sat down on the bench, and said, "Mother, now I should like something to eat. Will it soon be ready?" Then she said yes, and brought in 2 immense dishes full of food, which would have been enough to satisfy herself and her husband for a week. The youth, however, ate the whole of it himself, and asked if she had nothing more to set before him. "No," she replied, "that is all we have." "But that was only a taste. I must have more." She did not dare to oppose him, and went and put a huge cauldron full of food on the fire, and when it was ready, carried it in. At length come a few crumbs, said he, and ate all there was, but it was still not sufficient to appease his hunger. Then said he, "Father, I see well that with you I shall never have enough food. If you will get me an iron staff which is strong and which I cannot break against my knees, I will go out into the world." The farmer was glad, put his 2 horses in his cart, and fetched from the smith a staff so large and thick that the 2 horses could only just bring it away. The youth laid it across his knees, and snap, he broke it in 2 in the middle like a beanstalk and threw it away. The father then harnessed 4 horses and brought a bar which was so long and thick that the 4 horses could only just drag it. The son snapped this also in 2 against his knees, threw it away, and said, "Father, this can be of no use to me. You must harness more horses and bring a stronger staff." So the father harnessed 8 horses and brought one which was so long and thick that the 8 horses could only just carry it. When the son took it in his hand, he broke off a bit from the top of it also, and said, "Father, I see that you will not be able to procure me any such staff as I want. I will remain no longer with you." So he went away and gave out that he was a smith's apprentice. He arrived at a village where a smith lived, who was a greedy fellow who never did a kindness to anyone, but wanted everything for himself. The youth went into the smithy and asked if he needed a journeyman. "Yes," said the smith, and looked at him and thought, "That is a strong fellow, who will strike out well and earn his bread." So he asked, "How much wages do you want?" "I don't want any at all," he replied. "Only every fortnight, when the other journeymen are paid, I will give you 2 blows, and you must bear them." The miser was heartily satisfied, and thought he would thus save much money. Next morning the strange journeyman was to begin to work, but when the master brought the glowing bar and the youth struck his first blow, the iron flew asunder, and the anvil sank so deep into the earth that there was no bringing it out again. Then the miser grew angry and said, "Oh, but I can't make any use of you. You strike far too powerfully. What will you have for the other 1 blow?" Then said he, "I will only give you quite a small blow, that's all." And he raised his foot and gave him such a kick that he flew away over 4 loads of hay. Then he sought out the thickest iron bar in the smithy for himself, took it as a stick in his hand, and went onwards. When he had walked for some time, he came to a small farm and asked the bailiff if he did not require a head servant. Yes, said the bailiff, I can make use of one. You look a strong fellow who can do something. How much a year do you want as wages? He again replied that he wanted no wages at all, but that every year he would give him 3 blows which he must bear. Then the bailiff was satisfied, for he too was a covetous fellow. Next morning all the servants were to go into the wood, and the others were already up, but the head servant was still in bed. Then one of them called to him, Get up, it is time, we are going into the wood, and you must go with us. Ah, said he in a rough and surly tone, you may just go. Then I shall be back again before any of you. Then the others went to the bailiff and told him that the headman was still lying in bed and would not go into the wood with them. The bailiff said that they were to awaken him again and tell him to harness the horses. The headman, however, said as before, Just go there, I shall be back again before any of you. And then he stayed in bed 2 hours longer. At length he arose from the feathers, but first he got himself 2 bushels of peas from the loft, made himself some broth with them, ate it at his leisure, and when that was done, went and harnessed the horses and drove into the wood. Not far from the wood was a ravine through which he had to pass, so he first drove the horses on, and then stopped them and went behind the cart, took trees and brushwood, and made a great barricade, so that no horse could get through. When he was entering the wood, the others were just driving out of it with their loaded carts to go home. Then said he to them, Drive on, I will still get home before you do. He did not drive far into the wood, but at once tore 2 of the very largest trees of all out of the earth, threw them on his cart and turned round. When he came to the barricade, the others were still standing there, not able to get through. Don't you see, said he, that if you had stayed with me, you would have got home just as quickly, and would have had another hour's sleep? He now wanted to drive on, but his horses could not work their way through, so he unharnessed them, laid them on the top of the cart, took the shafts in his own hands, and pulled it all through, and he did this just as easily as if he had been laden with feathers. When he was over, he said to the others, There you see, I have got over quicker than you, and drove on, and the others had to stay where they were. In the yard he took a tree in his hand, showed it to the bailiff, and said, Isn't that a fine bundle of wood? Then said the bailiff to his wife, The servant is a good one. If he does sleep long, he is still home before the others. So he served the bailiff for a year, and when that was over and the other servants were getting their wages, he said it was time for him to take his too. The bailiff, however, was afraid of the blows which he was to receive, and earnestly entreated him to excuse him from having them, for rather than that he himself would be head servant, and the youth should be bailiff. No, said he, I will not be a bailiff. I am head servant, and will remain so, but I will administer that which we agreed on. The bailiff was willing to give him whatever he demanded, but it was of no use. The head servant said no to everything. Then the bailiff did not know what to do, and begged for a fortnight's delay, for he wanted to find some way of escape. The head servant consented to this delay. The bailiff summoned all his clerks together, and they were to think the matter over and give him advice. The clerks pondered for a long time, but at last they said that no one was sure of his life with the head servant, for he could kill a man as easily as a midge, and that the bailiff ought to make him get into the well and clean it, and when he was down below they would roll up one of the millstones which was lying there, and throw it on his head, and then he would never return to daylight. The advice pleased the bailiff, and the head servant was quite willing to go down the well. When he was standing down below at the bottom, they rolled down the largest millstone, and thought they had broken his skull, but he cried, Chase away those hens from the well, they are scratching in the sand up there, and throwing the grains into my eyes, so that I can't see. So the bailiff cried, Shh, shh, and pretended to frighten the hens away. When the head servant had finished his work, he climbed up and said, Just look what a beautiful necktie I have on, and behold, it was the millstone which he was wearing round his neck. The head servant now wanted to take his reward, but the bailiff again begged for a fortnight's delay. The clerks met together and advised him to send the head servant to the haunted mill to grind corn by night, for as yet no man had ever returned from there in the morning alive. The proposal pleased the bailiff. He called the head servant that very evening and ordered him to take 8 bushels of corn to the mill and grind it that night, for it was wanted. So the head servant went to the loft and put 2 bushels in his right pocket and 2 in his left, and took 4 in a wallet, half on his back and half on his breast, and thus laden went to the haunted mill. The miller told him that he could grind there very well by day, but not by night, for the mill was haunted, and that up to the present time whoever had gone into it at night had been found in the morning lying dead inside. He said, "I will manage it, just you go away to bed." Then he went into the mill and poured out the corn. About 11 o'clock he went into the miller's room and sat down on the bench. When he had sat there a while, the door suddenly opened and a large table came in, and on the table wine and roasted meats placed themselves, and much good food besides, but everything came of itself, for no one was there to carry it. After this the chairs pushed themselves up, but no people came, until all at once he saw fingers, which handled knives and forks and laid food on the plates, but with this exception he saw nothing. As he was hungry and saw the food, he too placed himself at the table, ate with those who were eating, and enjoyed it. When he had had enough, and the others also had quite emptied their dishes, he distinctly heard all the candles being suddenly snuffed out, and as it was now pitch dark, he felt something like a box on the ear. Then he said, "If anything of that kind comes again, I shall strike out in return." And when he had received a second box on the ear, he too struck out, and so it continued the whole night. He took nothing without returning it, but repaid everything with interest, and did not lay about him in vain. At daybreak, however, everything ceased. When the miller had got up, he wanted to look after him, and wondered if he was still alive. Then the youth said, "I have eaten my fill, have received some boxes on the ears, but I have given some in return." The miller rejoiced, and said that the mill was now released from the spell, and wanted to give him much money as a reward. But he said, "Money I will not have, I have enough of it." So he took his meal on his back, went home, and told the bailiff that he had done what he had been told to do, and would now have the reward agreed on. When the bailiff heard that, he was seriously alarmed and quite beside himself. He walked backwards and forwards in the room, and drops of perspiration ran down from his forehead. Then he opened the window to get some fresh air, but before he was aware, the head servant had given him such a kick that he flew through the window out into the air, and so far away that no one ever saw him again. Then said the head servant to the bailiff's wife, "If he does not come back, you must take the other blow." She cried, "No, no, I cannot bear it," and opened the other window, because drops of perspiration were running down her forehead. Then he gave her such a kick that she too flew out, and as she was lighter, she went much higher than her husband. Her husband cried, "Do come to me," but she replied, Come you to me, I cannot come to you." And they hovered about there in the air, and could not get to each other. And whether they are still hovering about or not, I do not know, but the young giant took up his iron bar and went on his way. There we have it, guys. I am going to leave it there for today. Those were two quite long stories. We will, of course, pick up the stories again next weekend. Like I said, I hope you do enjoy crafting away listening to me in the background. I really do enjoy reading to you. I enjoy you coming to visit with me. And long may it continue, because after this book, I have another one lined up. So, you are seeing this on Sunday. Tomorrow will be Monday. Of course, being here in the UK, Monday means that the Queen will be laid to rest. It will be her funeral. I unfortunately have to work, so I will not be able to watch the funeral on the television, but I will record it and watch it when I get home. And at work we will observe a minute's silence. I don't really like to put anything like this on my channel, but I would just like to say a massive thank you to the Queen for all of her service for our country. 70 years on the throne was a massive achievement. Nobody else has ever done it before her. I am a little wary what the future will bring now that we have King Charles III, but what will be, will be. And I now hope that the Queen has been reunited with her late husband and her mother and father. She has certainly earned her eternal sleep, and again, I would like to just thank her for everything she did for the UK in her reign. So, without meaning to leave this on a downer, I do feel though that at these times you do have to mark the occasion. So, Thank you to everyone for coming by and visiting with me. Thank you for listening to the stories. There is another action-packed week here at Manfa's Makes to come. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy some of your crafting time. And I will see you for the week ahead. So until then, stay safe, be kind, look after one another, get some good quality time in with your loved ones, and get some good quality crafting time in. I will see you in the next one or around the YouTube streets. Love you guys. Bye.